I put 50 players into a server for a week in a hardcore Minecraft world to watch the civilizations grow. Watch the players grow and expand their bases while some loot and ravage others. Watch teams create alliances and nations while some burden others to the ground. Players must prepare themselves for the end of the week where the final battle will be held to solidify the best civilization.
So if you don't understand from the intro, I'm going to be putting 50 players into a Minecraft server and watching them create civilization and seeing if they make peace or war. I'm just going to be watching them in the sky and seeing what they get up to and showing it to you guys. Hope you guys enjoy. As players started joining the server, they respawned into a jungle with a bunch of mobs, but luckily nobody died right away. Right away, all the players started grabbing the essentials and got to work right away, preparing themselves for their first night in the server, while some just stood there and admired the view. But eventually, all the players got a move on and started to explore the island, leaving the jungle, mining, and also finding ancient structures, all in time for their first night. Each player had a different strategy for the night. Some dug out a hole, while the braver players continued mining to gain power the fastest in the server. Fortunately, each player survived the night, and new players joined in the morning. Meet Unhappy, a new player at spawn, who was quickly approached by somebody named Boy. The two decided they were better off together and formed an alliance. Seeing this in the chat, a player in the mines came back to the surface and showed his dominance by attacking the players with a diamond spear, which ultimately led to the duo splitting up and Boy finding a village, claiming it as his and looting it up. Back in the jungle, new players like Joe were still spawning in, and while Boy was lounging in his new home making a new base, Joe also came across the village. In their first interactions, I thought that they would end up killing each other, but luckily, Boy decided to choose peace with Joe and took him back to his base. A safe house under the village is where the two of them spent most of their time together. As the other players explored the land and explored caves underneath, a divide was created between the older players and the newer, where some had diamonds and others were just getting moored. Anyways, Boy's crew had grown, with a player named Marley joining in. Their base quickly became a refuge site for new players. For example, a player named MP quickly came across the village taking the resources for himself, but when he came across Boy and his crew, instead of being welcomed with open arms, he was forcefully kicked out of the village by the people and was left with no choice but to find himself a place to stay, showing the first signs of discrimination in the server. After his escape, MP found a cave site that was good enough to live in, calling it the seaside and let new players know that they could come and stay if needed. The seaside was rich in materials, being right beside a massive cave. But back at the village, Boy and Joe were faced with two looters trying to get into their base. The two looters were essentially trying to kill the team and take all their loot. And when they managed to get inside, so much happened so quickly. One of the looters trapped Boy in a corner, and as Joe was coming down, he took out one of the looters, but it was too late to save Boy. Rest in peace, man. This guy literally made a TikTok about this.
Well, guys, the server is up and running. Let's go, W!
I decided to teleport all the players to the village in hopes of the players making teams and trading things. And at the start, it was all peaceful. They were meeting each other and giving away loot. But somehow there was a zombie pigman locked in the village house. And when somebody opened the door letting it free, a new player got murdered. In respect of the loss, a headstone was placed behind the house by Unhappy, Joe, and MP. Sadly, no positives came from that idea, just a death. That's my bad. Except for the squid in the beginning, Miliop, finding a new village claiming it as his and warning everyone not to come. While MP went back to his base in exile, he continued to mine, unknowing of the player following him back to his base, Unhappy. When MP finished mining, they finally met each other and Unhappy requested to join his team. And the two of them lived together in secret for a long time, hidden from all the players on the map. In the main village, Miliop returned to recruit a new member to his crew and luckily met up with Atomic, who took him up on his offer, and they returned back to Miliop's village, digging out a place to call home. Yeah, by the way, pretty much everyone lives underground. Anyways, new players continued to struggle in the nighttime, but now had players to defend them. And as this new player ran behind this guy, he got absolutely destroyed and sacrificed. And this new player named Nix, he took his loot right away and actually ended up teaming up with Joe. And the two of them ended up going to the savanna biomes and finding a plot of land to build on. And while places like the seaside wanted to stay hidden, Joe and Nix did the exact opposite, building farms and starting up castle walls. This caused Miliop to come investigate, but luckily nothing happened. But it wasn't Miliop they had to worry about, because after he left their castle, Joe went out to mine in the caves below. Under their castle, there was this huge cave that they hadn't explored yet. Fortunately, Joe's optimism got him killed, and he fell to the bottom of the cave, which sucked because he was building a really sick castle. With Joe gone, Miliop and his team stayed the richest team in the server, with an enchantment table and full diamond armor. And these guys were ruthless. They just killed the player just for sneaking around in their village. Poor guy. But luckily, this new player, Oakplane, stayed far away from Miliop's village, and eventually came across Joe's abandoned castle. He took his loot from the chest and started inviting people to come to the castle. But when they did, he would pretty much enslave them and send them down to the mines to go retrieve cobblestone to continue building up the walls. And this guy's name is Tundra, by the way. While Tundra had been working away in the mines, Atomic and Mylop had been collecting resources for their base as well. At this point, civilizations were quickly expanding as the first building in the castle was being prepared. At this time, the landmark on the map had been known as the castle, but they wanted more than that. And as they prepared their flag, they decided on the name the Empire. The Empire quickly became a place that all players knew and would come to interact with others. Even MP was allowed to come here. As the construction of the Empire continued, it was very clear that nothing was going to stop them. Not even Miliop, who had fallen behind in numbers in his army, ultimately losing his power. But he would still try, and after a standoff in the mines, he went over to the Empire and took down their flag. Out of boredom and curiosity, I decided to make an event for the players. I present to you guys the ore rush. I filled the main village with ores scattered all around the area to attract all the players back to each other, and it worked. These are some new players to the server, Porg and D. During the ore rush, Porg quickly found the village and got a bunch of the ores, collecting iron and coal for himself. But he also came across Oakplane, who didn't want him there and took all the ores for himself. Now, remember this moment because this really made Porg mad. With Oakplane taking all the ores, he also came across Marley, who he ended up taking back to the Empire. Marley was invited to the team instantly and joined without a doubt. But one of the new players, Porg, had been exploring and found Meliop's old village. The other new player, D, was making their own home. Without knowing that right above them, Oakplane was watching and was planning an entrance. And as he did, D surrendered instantly. And because Tundra had become Oakplane's new friend, he needed a new worker. And just like old times, he handed over some armor and some tools and sent D to work. While cobblestone was being collected, Tundra and Oakplane were planning something bigger. Unfortunately, the seaside's coordinates had been leaked, and MP was on his own working on the base while he was confronted by Oakplane. Because of his generosity and open arms to all the server, he let Oakplane into his home. And once they were inside, Oakplane went through with his plan and took out MP. With lava burning at his feet, MP truly had nothing to do, and eventually the inevitable happened and he burned to death. With MP gone, Oakplane looted up and went back to get his members to finish the job, but Marley and Tundra were already crafting TNT and getting ready. Do you guys remember him? This is Porg, the mad guy from the ore rush. While the Empire was getting ready for the attack on the seaside, Porg had been making a tunnel through their base to sneak into once they had left. And when they left for the seaside on their horses, Porg came out of his hole and started to loot up the entire Empire. He took everything they had, as well as their crops, but he wasn't finished yet. At the same time, the Empire had arrived to the seaside at last. With nobody left inside, they decided to go up and see if they missed anything the first time in. And that they definitely did. They found a whole bunch of secret chests this time with a bunch of loot, as well as enchantment tables. Once they were finished looting for sure, they started setting up TNT, blowing up the farm first. And once they were done with the farm, they moved on to the main base, leaving nothing left behind. Although MP had died, Unhappy, another resident of the seaside, remained alive as he logged out of the server before this happened. After the success of the raid, the Empire left the seaside behind, unknowing of the damage that they were about to come home to. Porg set fire to the Empire Hall while they were out on the raid, as well as the stable. He also destroyed every single chest they had, and he did all that and left before anybody knew he was there. When the Empire got home from their journey, they were in complete distraught with the view that they were seeing, trying to stop the fire by any means, but it was way too late. And as leader, Oakplane ordered them to go out and find whoever did this. So Tundra and Marley went out and found an old shipwreck and decided to stay there for the night. When they saw someone suspiciously close in the distance, they were met with Porg and instantly started fighting them because it was obvious to them that he was the one who did this. Though Porg was outnumbered, he had way better armor than the both of them and started chasing Tundra down on his horse. Eventually, Tundra's horse was killed and he had to start running away on his feet, but he wasn't fast enough and he lost his life to Porg. But his sacrifice was respected and Marley escaped through the ocean swimming away from Porg. As Miliop slowly built his lair, he was called over to the Empire by Oakplane. Together they discussed a peace treaty for the time being, where Oakplane offered him a bunch of materials if he would kill Porg. So, the two groups teamed up and met back up at the Empire capital. They stayed there for the night while they made their plan on taking out Porg. While this was going on, Unhappy joined back into the world and was faced with the terror and the loss of MP and the seaside. With nothing left to do, Unhappy knew that he had to leave the seaside and go through the jungle to get out of there. leaving everything that they built together behind. On the way off the island, Unhappy paid his respects to his teammate, leaving a grave right on the edge of the island. He took one last look at his fallen friend and left the island entirely. Because of that, Unhappy survived as the Empire came back to the seaside to take him out, and they went to the island where he built the headstone and missed him just by a second. He had swam across the ocean and spent the night inside of a well. In the morning, Unhappy continued his travels and found a new island. Regardless of the peace treaty, when Marley came into Miliop's village, he was chased out of the village with a sword behind him. Miliop's group in the Empire had made a peace treaty to take out Porg, but that had not been going on in this situation at all. Marley ran as much as he could, but eventually ran out of hunger and gave up. Even when showing his mercy, Miliop still killed him for no reason at all, and eventually blamed it on the TNT that was found in his inventory. After the death of Marley, the Empire had pretty much lost all of its manpower, letting Miliop's group rise to the top, which they called the Atomic Cult. After the escape of the seaside, Unhappy tried to rebuild his peaceful life, and Oak Plain did the exact same thing at the Empire, rebuilding the Capitol Hall, but on his own this time. The Atomic Cult continued expanding their lair, making secret bases in the walls. Inside these rooms, they would have duplication machines, which they got insanely rich off of. As players like Unhappy stayed out of all the trouble, building a nice little house on a mountain, Miliop decided to go through with his contract and found Porg himself, chasing him through biomes and biomes. Swimming through oceans, chasing him on a boat. He was really doing anything to catch this guy. But luckily for Porg, he lived to see another day. The Empire had finally been rebuilt, with the new Empire capital, and also respect for his fallen soldiers. And eventually, Miliop arrived to the Empire and told Oak Plain about the whereabouts of Porg, and they instantly went out together. And after they finally found him, they started a huge duel in the jungle. Miliop's knockback enchantment was a huge advantage in this fight, throwing Porg back every time he got hit. They were also using cobwebs to slow him down so he couldn't escape. And eventually, the revenge on the Empire was finally fulfilled, completing the contract and sadly ending the peace treaty between the two groups. After the death of Porg, the Empire was still being rebuilt with new walls. Oak Plain wanted to have walls and defense high enough to protect things like his enchantment table, and himself. Eventually, Miliop told me to teleport to him, and he let me know that he might kill Unhappy. And eventually, him and the Atomic Cult set off of the island and started heading towards him. Once they arrived, they followed his coordinates all the way to his new base, through the same path he took to escape from them. He was just minding his own business collecting leaves for his house, when eventually his night turned into a chase. He was chased all the way through the unknown forest that he hadn't been through yet. So Unhappy decided it was best to build up. This turned into a huge bridge battle, and Unhappy had to find a way to get to the river closest to him. Eventually, Miliop caught up and knocked him straight off of his bridge, but luckily he landed straight into the river. And then there was another chase. Unhappy swam through the river, still questioning why he was being chased. Nor Unhappy or MP did anything to make these people mad. But that did not matter to the Atomic Cult. They used their knockback enchantments and cobwebs to slow him down. But Unhappy kept up a good fight and kept escaping, surviving a 3v1 for over 5 minutes. But eventually, Unhappy got stuck in the middle of the ocean and had no choice but to swim underwater, where he was finally caught by Miliop and killed in the bottom of the ocean. This right here marks the end of the seaside civilization, which went extinct for no reason. The Atomic Cult left a gravestone on the island that he last stepped foot on, and left to make it back home before sunrise. At this point, I realized that civilizations were falling way too quickly and players were dying way too fast. So I knew I had to end the simulation with a final battle. The players were warned and all given 4 hours to prepare for the battle. And the two civilizations standing are the Atomic Cult and the Empire, so it's going to be a 2v2 for the final battle. By the way, this is Oak Plain. He just changed his skin. At the cult's base, they all prepared for the final battle, saying their final goodbyes to the home if things go wrong. All while Oak Plain waited in the sky for them to start the battle. When they arrived to the village, Oak Plain stood tall, screaming in chat that he is the Empire. Miliop started his climb up to the tower. When Oak Plain started to drop down spikes, Oak Plain accidentally fell, but luckily Water Bucket clutched, and the battle on the ground begun. The two teams destroyed the nature beside them to kill each other, with the two leaders, Miliop and Oak Plain, finally fighting in the end. Eventually, Miliop died and Oak Plain won the battle, leaving it to a 2v1 in favor for the Empire. The cult member had no idea what to do and was slowly backed up by the threat of netherite swords and a blazing fire. As the Empire had god apples, he truly had nothing he could do. He knew it was the end for him, so he went in for the final battle, and the Empire won, marking the best civilization in this video. Although the Empire lost most of its manpower, they still came through. Oak Plain had won the war finally, but he felt a bittersweet feeling looking at the loss of his friends. Although the Empire had come up on top, his friends weren't there to see it happen. Sitting back looking at the graves, he thinked on all the things they did that week, and looking back on it, he knew he couldn't have done it alone.